Hello, cryptids of the internet. Thank you so warmly for tuning in as I reflect upon a very positive experience I had. In my previous video, I did talk about a lot of negative experiences, but this time we're gonna balance it out by talking about something wholesome. And it is about the time I became a cowboy. I consider myself to be a student of the universe. I realized that when I approach life in that way, everything becomes a learning opportunity. And this is why I actually started this channel, because I can reflect about my own experiences, I can learn about yours, and I can get advice from you. I think something that bothers me with YouTubers in general is that they're constantly speaking at the audience and giving people advice, and there's a level of dishonesty when someone gives advice without 100% following it. I mean, come on, not everyone is following the advice they give. They just want to be in a mentorship position and have an authoritative position, and I feel like a lot of YouTubers do that. But I am a student and I'm here to learn and to learn about you, learn about myself, and just reflect together. I think it's fun. To start the story, I have to take you back with me to the time I left the games studio that I worked with. Again, you can watch my first video to learn about how that experience went. When I left that job, I slowly started to process how much of a weight this past job gave me, because that weight started to lift slowly, and I started to notice a difference. I would describe how I felt after I got out of that studio as depressive. And the way I left that job was that it was kind of like a soft layoff. My position was changed from part-time to casual, and I was just never called back in. So yeah, the way I was let go was also kind of a very sour experience. But yeah, I was jobless. I was kind of worn out from being in a very uncomfortable employment situation. I did a lot of job search begrudgingly, and I just rested around. I had no creative energy. I woke up feeling miserable and I went to sleep feeling miserable too. But one thing I did a lot of is going out on walks with my mum to a local park. It was a very great activity to participate in as I start to heal and reflect upon my employment experience. We would walk at this park. It's a reserve, and there is a playground there that has seen better days. I used to hang out there with the neighborhood kids all the time, but as the years go by, the paint of the playgrounds start to chip away and everything kind of loses its vibrancy. So that playground is a little bit depressing, and every time I look at it, I see ghosts of our past selves as children, little wisps of our memories just bouncing around. And it is kind of a bittersweet thing to witness. But it did actually kind of bring about a melancholic feeling in my heart every time I walked past that playground, because it reminds me how much we have to grow and deal with society, and how much of our past selves we have to compartmentalize or suppress. But yeah, next to that playground is a beautiful large reserve. There's a cricket field and a soccer field, a lot of beautiful greenery. So my mum and I walked there all the time. And one day we were silently walking together. I always look for a nice stick that I could use as a walking stick. The gum trees shed a lot of branches, so I'd go foraging for a nice stick that I can use. Yes, I was walking with my little wooden stick with my mum quietly, and then I declared something to my mum. I said, "Mum, I'm going to stop looking for art jobs. I'm going to be a cowboy. I am just going to run away as far away as possible from a desk, from a computer, and I'm going to be a cowboy." I said that lightheartedly, and my mum lightheartedly replied, "Sure, yeah, you can be a cowboy if you want. You can do whatever you want." Now, I absolutely love my mom. She has been someone who offers me good advice, but allows me to do whatever I want. She let me get into art and game development. It is very stereotypical for ethnic parents to want their kids to be engineers, doctors, or lawyers, but not my mom. I think my mum saw something really different in my heart, and she knew that if she stripped away the creativity from me, I will be a insufferable person. And she knew that at a very, very early age, maybe age 5, she knew that she couldn't take me away from creativity. And I think that's something that applies to many artists, that you can't suppress an artist's creativity because they will live very bitter lives. And I could totally imagine myself like in another dimension. I'm probably not an artist, and I'm probably an awful person. So yeah, I jokingly said I'm going to be a cowboy, and our walk continued. And the thought about being a cowboy just lingered in my head. So I thought, for fun, let me just research any jobs that are adjacent to being like a cowboy. I don't know. What I ended up finding and being satisfied with is park ranger jobs, conservation jobs, zookeeping, anything that's outdoorsy, where I can be in nature, working at a reserve or a sanctuary. These are all really great jobs. And along my research, I found that there were applications opened for a nature stewardship course that was being held in my local city, like just 10-minute drive from my place. And the applications were going to close in like a couple of days or a week. And truly, I do think that is a sign from God or Allah. I believe I will mention Allah and God a lot, but this can be translated to your personal faith. If you believe in the universe, if you know that there is a form of creator that you believe in, I want you to be able to relate to them from your own perspective. But yeah, how crazy is it that I found a course that is very relevant to what I want to do? Immediately, I put through the best application I can possibly put through. A couple of weeks later, I get an acceptance letter to attend the nature stewardship course. I always look back fondly at the nature stewardship course that I did, because everyone in my classroom, except for myself and another person, are grandparents. So there were around 20 of us, and most of them are retired or their grandparents, and it was really sweet. I became really good friends with my classmates, and every week we would learn about a different topic. On a specific week, we learnt about different grasses, and then we learnt about different landforms, and then fauna, and it's all related to the local city. So we learnt about the native flora and fauna of the city that we live in. And we not only learnt inside a classroom, we also had little field trips across the city to local protected reserves and parks and forests. And it was so lovely. I learnt so much about the city I live in. There are new places that I now know about, little secret passageways and little secret forests that are very fun to explore. It was so amazing. And we even planned hiking trips together outside of the class, and we got lost a little bit in one of our hikes, but it was still really fun. And it wasn't so dangerous. They're just bushes. We did find a snake, but if you stomp nearby, the snakes just run away. And to reflect a little bit about the headspace I was in, I just took things as they came through, moment by moment, day by day. I was simply existing and enjoying what I'm doing. I wasn't thinking about the future. I wasn't thinking about the past. I was just enjoying it and not taking it seriously. Well, of course, the topics that we explored in the nature stewardship was serious and important, but in terms of the headspace that I was in, I was very relaxed. There wasn't any stress on getting work done and succeeding. That's another thing. I wasn't worried about getting an outcome from this. I was just purely enjoying it with my awesome peers in my class. If I was to use a word to describe the whole experience, it was very grounding and it was light. It felt very light to experience that. I like to reflect upon two different experiences and measure out the contrast, the comparison between them and the contrast. Because when I do that, it helps me figure out myself a lot more, understand myself a lot better. We only truly have ourselves. Even though that you might, or myself, I have a beautiful, wonderful, loving family, but at the end, you will be on your own when you're dead. That sounds a little bit dark, but I am striving to be myself's best friend, and I want to know myself the most. And to be able to achieve that, it's important to understand myself by comparing and contrasting my personal experiences. So as I continued studying with the Nature Stewardship program, I was also looking for work. But at this time, when I was looking for work, first of all, I was looking for relevant jobs that are cowboy adjacent. Before the Nature Stewardship, I was stressfully applying for work and applying to as many jobs as I can. But now I applied to a lot less jobs and I was really chill about it. And listen to how crazy this is. As the nature stewardship was coming to an end, a really interesting job pops up. It is a conservation officer role in my local city. Now, if this is not God sent, I'm not sure what it would be. It's like everything started happening as a domino effect after I changed the way I think, after I set the intention, and then I took very easy, very, very achievable steps to get there. God said, I will do everything else. It's crazy because I'm comparing how I got hired for my first job. I was stressed. I was striving for it. I was begging God to get the concept art job. But with this one, I just didn't really care all of that much. Nothing is worth it. At the end, nothing is worth being a loser over. If something doesn't want to bring itself to you, like just let it go. Find something else. And don't waste too much time on it. That's stuff that I'm telling myself right now, actually. So when I saw that job ad, I knew so deeply in my heart that I was going to get that job. I don't know why, I just knew I did. But it wasn't a forceful understanding of the situation. It was just like a matter of fact. So I put through the best resume and cover letter I could possibly put together. I sent that through. I went to the plaza and I bought myself a cowboy hat and some cool jeans and a cool belt. And my dad saw me trying on my cowboy outfit And he said, Zap, you bought the stables before you have the horse. But at this point, I didn't really care if I was going to get the job or not. I don't even know how to describe that feeling. One, I knew I was going to get the job. Two, I didn't really care if I was going to get the job or not. Three, I was going to be a cowboy regardless of what my results are. And I don't really know how to describe this feeling. Maybe I'll turn it into an equation. I love equations. It makes things a lot more understandable. But yeah, I was going to be a cowboy regardless of the outcomes. I was going to wear my cowboy outfit, and I'm going to put a dry wheat stem or a grass, and I'm going to go to a local park and just look longingly into the distance, and I'm going to enjoy myself whilst I do that. But lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, I get called in for an interview. I absolutely nailed that interview. I was so proud of myself. Immediately after I get out from the interview, I call my mum, tell her I did really well. I believe it was the next day I got a call from the job and they said, congratulations, you got the job. And I felt the same. And I think that's really fascinating to say. I felt the same in my heart because a part of me already knew that I was going to get that job. So there wasn't any change of headspace. I believe it is my awful experience in my previous employment that forced me in this corner where actually I don't have to catastrophize anything. It made me grow in this really captivating way where I now see opportunities as things that come and go, or things that are meant to be and things that are not meant to be for myself. And for that alone, I wouldn't regret working in that awful studio because this is what I learned about myself. And this is how I grew. I'm going to interrupt my story for a moment and just let you know that I actually sell really awesome 3D stickers in my store. I'm trying to make the coolest stickers you'll ever find in the universe. And if you're enjoying the story so far, please consider subscribing, because every time you subscribe, a little zapling on the internet is born, and it will adopt your personality and traits. And every single zapling is so unique and adorable. In fact, comment below which zapling on the screen right now you identify with the most. And let's continue the story. Now let's discuss the employment experience I had. I want to start with the supervisor I worked with. I'm going to call him Andy. And God bless Andy's heart. And I mean that in the most sincere, genuine way, because that guy was the best supervisor I've ever worked with. Now, mind you, my former boss would have absolutely hated you, Andy, simply because you are a man and you are straight. That's how hateful she was. But enough about her. This is about Andy. Andy gave me the keys to a ute, and then he gave me a map, and he let me free. He never micromanaged me. He never had any form of distrust towards me. He absolutely trusted me, and he was like a caring uncle. He made a lot of awful dad jokes. I still think about him sometimes. My main activity in this job was to identify all of the giant trees that we have in our local city's reserves. And what I had to do is mark them down on what looks like a Google Maps app on steroids. It was a very specific and detailed map. A GIS, that's what it's called. And I had I looked like a dork. I had this really funny backpack with an antenna poking out of it, which detects where I am standing. It connects to multiple different satellites to be able to pinpoint exactly where I am. And through that, I'm able to go to the large trees that we have. We have massive river red gum trees that are protected by the local city council. My job was to find them in our reserves, mark them, and measure them. So basically, I wasn't a cowboy who was lassoing cattle and sheep. I was a special kind of cowboy. I was lassoing fat trees. I literally had to wrap a specific type of measuring tape around the trees and measure them. My job involved hugging trees all day, every day, and it was the most beautiful, serene experience ever. I was allowed to drive the ute into the reserves and into the forests, and I would buy myself a nice coffee and a muffin, and I would sit at the top of a hill and watch a sunset sometimes. It was beautiful. It was so beautiful. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. I would see a lot of little critters, and I sometimes find cool mushrooms. I got to participate in a lot of really fun activities. One of them is doing controlled burns in Australia to strengthen the native flora. You would burn areas during the warmer seasons so that the weeds can die, but the native flora grow. How amazing is that? I get to use this thing called a kestrel, and we have to monitor the weather every couple of minutes. I think it's 5 to 10 minutes. We have to make sure that the winds don't get too abruptly different, just because fire is kind of dangerous to control. I got to use this really cool thermal camera that identifies where the hot spots are, because after you do a controlled burn, you have to hose it all down, and some spots are really hard to visually identify as like still burning. So you would use the thermal camera to identify those bright spots that indicate that they're still warm and there's probably a little spark of fire underneath a rock. And we just hose it down. Another cool thing that I forgot to mention is whilst I'm measuring trees, I'm also looking for some native fauna that are hiding out in the little habitats that we built. So I would use this giant pole with a camera, and I would carefully peep it through the hole of the habitat to see if there's anything in there. And I did see a few little curled up possums. How cute is that? And I also participated in the annual fauna survey. That was so fun. We would set up tiny little traps for frogs and lizards to walk through so we can kind of have an estimated understanding of how many native fauna are in the areas. I did a daytime survey and a nighttime survey. In the nighttime surveys, we use red light to help us spot the nocturnal creatures. It was really cool. It was inside a very dark forest, but this is a very great highlight. We spotted an endangered species. It's called the brush-tailed phascogale. How cute is that? I also got to hold a bat on my sleeve. Of course, it was under professional supervision, but it was so adorable. These tiny little bats are so cute. But yeah, being involved in the fauna surveys was amazing. And doing the controlled burns was also really fantastic. I think I'm going to continue the story a bit later because you'll probably just see a quick camera cut to a different version of me. But personally, I'm going to go see some friends tonight at a steakhouse. So I'm excited for that. And I will continue the story in a moment. Hey cryptids, I am back. I bet you miss me so much. I know I miss you. So one thing I wanted to point out that I forgot to mention at the start of recording was that I did in fact get paid more in this job. So I was getting paid more to do very low mental effort tasks, because if you're an artist, it does require a lot of mental energy to make art, especially if you're making it for someone else and you have no particular emotional attachment to it. It's really hard. There are some crazy artists out there who can handle that, not me. I'm too emotionally invested in the creative process. One of the jobs I had as a conservation officer is to also get rid of weeds. Other teammates in my group were in charge of that. One of those weeds that were prominent within our region are hawthorn bushes. They're everywhere. And I ended up foraging some of the hawthorn berries and I made it into a jam. It turned out pretty good. The thing about hawthorn bushes is that they're very prickly and they spread so quickly. But the really good thing about having them is that they provide really good habitats for small birds that are actually native. So it is a bit of a complicated topic when it comes to getting rid of some weeds because, yeah, they are really great habitats for native birds. Speaking about birds, my favorite bird to spot out in the wild are pardalots. They're so beautiful. And a lot of the things that I really enjoy finding out in the wild are what I would call fairy remnants. These are little interesting structures that I'd find, or animal skulls that have been deliberately placed in a specific position. And I just like to make stories about fairies that come around and play, and they're hiding around the forests. To those of you who don't live in Australia, we have some of the best playgrounds ever. And usually, whenever there is a publicly available reserve or a forest or a park, there would always be a little playground next to it. So one of my favorite things to find are the flying foxes. A lot of parks here have mini flying foxes. One thing that I like to pretend is that I am testing the equipment to make sure that it's safe, of course. Very important work. As someone who's working with local council, it is my duty to test all the playground equipment and make sure that they're safe. It's serious work. Most of the time, I would not touch the fairy remnants because I respect their work. They are very significant to the parks. But sometimes I would collect little trinkets and I would bring them back to my desk. Like one time I found a little marble underneath a very big tree. And then under another big tree I found a little cute ceramic plate. These fairies are just gifting me so much pretty little trinkets. How could I not accept them? I turned the marble into a little cute fidget toy with this bark that I found, and it's so perfect. It's so fun to play with. And I usually keep all of my little treasures on my desk. I'll show you an image of my desk right now and the little close-up too. It was so fun. I would actually like to tell you about a little spooky fairy story that happened to me whilst I was working in the conservation job. Every time I would find a naturally formed arch with a tree or multiple trees, I would ask permission from the fairies to enter through the arch. Now, saying this, I think I'm going to get two different kinds of reactions from different people. One group of people are going to staunchly believe in fairies and they're going to have strong opposing feelings towards that. And the other group of people are those very boring, normal, average people who will scoff at me for being whimsical. And to both those groups, I say bug off. Let me enjoy my whimsy in peace. I live by the philosophy that I am going to be whimsical in every corner of my life, forever. A lot of people say that fae or fairies are evil and cheeky. Well, the fairies are friends with me, so I can't relate. Back to the spooky fairy story. I have made it a ritual to ask permission from the fairies every time I walk through the arch. On one particular occasion, I had visited a reserve. It was mainly plain fields, dried plain fields of tall grass and big trees. And it was nearby an old retired landfill. So a hill has grown over the old landfill. There's a bit of like negative energy in the depths underneath the ground. There was a specific vibe around that area. And in recent history, the ooze from the landfill has affected the nearby bogs and the frog population. So the fairies over there are very, very protective of their land. So over there, I found a naturally formed arch, and I did the usual. I asked permission from the fairies, and as I stepped forward, I was looking down and I see a rock get thrown at my foot. And I immediately look up and see no one around. I looked around and I surveyed the area. There are no other humans. The closest human is miles and miles away from me. There is no one to be seen at all. So I knew I was wise enough not to enter through the portal, and I respect that. The fairies didn't want me to be there. And yeah, I never went through that arch. Fairies are not evil. Sometimes they're just protective. Most of the time, they're my friends. And that was the only time I wasn't allowed to enter a portal throughout my entire duration that I worked in the forests. I'd like to also share something that I did on the side too. It was a really fun hobby. I kept a journal where I took photos of native animals and then I would draw them. So it's a little journal of birds mainly. That's the New Holland honeyeater. This is my photo, and I would find a picture on the internet that's got more resolution. But yeah, it feels very rewarding to have a selection of photos, a little gallery of all the stuff you were able to spot. Sometimes I would find feathers too. Eastern rosella. Oh, and then I found some quails, some wild quails. How cute. But yeah, this is a bit of a journal. I really obsessed over learning about different tree anatomy, learning about some local weeds. I did a bit of research on hawthorn berries before actually making the jam. I stuck the whole tutorial on how to make hawthorn berry jam in this book. So there's an entire tutorial. A lot of different weeds that I loved to research and study. Oh, it was so fun doing this stuff. I realized that during the duration of my role as a conservation officer, my creative tank was slowly filling back up because at the start of the role, I was so creatively depleted. I had no motivation and no inspiration to make art. But throughout the role, I was making art, I was drawing birds, I was making stories about fairies. I was slowly regaining that inspiration. And as my creative tank was filling up to the top, my role as a conservation officer was also coming to an end. It was this beautiful sort of relationship between me completely healing and me being ready to move on to bigger, more incredible creative ventures in my life. Every beautiful thing eventually comes to an end. It's like having a slice of a really, really good cake and you are left yearning for more slices of cake. But despite the fact that there isn't more cake, you're still very satisfied. You're still grateful for even tasting such a good cake. And that's how I would describe my role as a conservation officer. And speaking about the cake metaphor for a bit longer, if you have too much of that cake, you'll get sick of it. There was a stark, alarming difference between myself and some of the co-workers I worked with. They were miserable, they were anxious and depressed. These people have been working for 10, 15, 20, even 30 years in the same role. And I wonder if it's their soul fighting them to experience different things, because the soul always yearns to grow and wants to experience things, to expand itself. And perhaps their souls want to grow, but they are stuck in this cycle, unfortunately. But I do understand that some of them do have responsibilities and they need to pay rent or take care of their kids. But it was just very fascinating seeing a group of people who are always out in nature and doing fauna surveys every year, how they could feel a lot of this negativity in their heart. So the only way I was able to rationalize or make it logical in my mind is that they need newer experiences because they have been doing the same thing every single day for years and years on end. So despite the fact that my role was ending, my inner child was so satisfied, and she thanked me that I fulfilled her dream of being a cowboy. And she was ready to move on to the next big thing. The day that I left the job, it was the last day. It was a beautiful sunny day. But all I could ever see was the tears welling up in my eyes. I absolutely bawled my eyes out in the car on my way back home. Of course, I didn't cry in front of the team. That's cringe. It was a victorious sort of sadness because I fulfilled my dream of becoming a cowboy, and it happened, and it healed me. This job has permanently shifted my mind. I now approach my career direction in a more intuitive way, where I look within to see if these opportunities and roles do align with my flow. Am I fighting against the flow, or am I going with it? How does my inner child feel about any specific job? And I have been getting a lot of amazing opportunities ever since I ended that role, because I feel like I am so much more in tune with what I love. And I trust it. I trust my intuition. Following my intuition had been a bit of a struggle in my earlier years, but time and time again, I have proven that my intuition is always right. And people say that all the time, but it actually takes courage to intuitively make decisions. And this, my dear Zaplings on the internet, is the story of how I once became a cowboy.
I'll always deviate from the path. I'll never follow a trail. I'm looking for the biggest tree. There are fairies and little mushroom people with singing, dancing,